So we've been to Earth Day before, and there I reminded you that every day is Earth Day, and that it would be good to remember your feet. That this is the fastest, most simple way to ground. Anybody need grounding ever? Me, I do. So that's how I learn these things. So we'll be making our way into some standing poses. So if it has not been clear sort of how it's going, is that we're learning all of the little details of how to practice, so that say you're, I don't know, at yoga in the park and the teacher goes, Warrior One, everyone. You'd be like, oh, okay, I've been there before. I know what that means. Instead of the like kind of thing that has to happen if it's, you know, your first time and you haven't been through extensive trainings, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to bring forward that steering from the feet concept that I introduced last week. Have you had a chance to play with that? Is that a wonderful, subtle inner exploration of this feeling of stability? So we sort of just played with it a little bit, and whenever I did it, you know, my feet moved to show you, but the actions can get more and more subtle, so that it's sort of just the movement from the foot that then stabilizes in the hips. So we're doing a little inner rotation and then a grounding to the outside edge of the foot. And that will come with us as we start to bend the knee, right? So now, whenever you see things like this, you'll be like, oh, come down. Because all of this, and think of over time, hundreds of times in repetition without paying attention, and that's going to lead to wear and tear. So we'll be coming into a Warrior One. Oh. After visiting kneeling position, which we haven't done yet. So kneeling foundation is with the back leg either down or toes tucked, and really feeling stability here now in this position. And then once you feel stability there, maybe even coming a little bit in, and you'll reach this point where it's like, aha, I have found my edge where strange behaviors are arising, but I can manage it. I can still remember my feet and feel it, and it's, what's happening? And keep grounding. And eventually, as you're there, you can either find a place where you can stabilize or just gently back off, stabilize there, and come back to it. So this is a fabulous embodied lesson of finding your edge, and then how much is too much that you can't stabilize within, and having a felt sense of that. Because putting yourself on the edge in this way has a certain nervous system load, right? You're like, am I gonna fall? My feet's here? Because you're trying to find this activation. So find the place at the edge where you can still breathe and feel stable and solid, and then just gently make your way in. Then we'll come up to standing and be in a high lunge, and we'll shorten the high lunge until you can keep the back heel down and find all the core actions in that position, and start to work with some knee strengthening things and foot alignment things, so that we have the very beginning of the movement without compensation, right? Because all the information is there. If you're starting to go out of alignment here, it's only going to get worse as we start to load the leg. So we can find the right alignment right here at the beginning, find the foot activation, find what it feels like in the hip before we advance into, you know, really extending ourselves, and maybe even overextending ourselves and not knowing. Okay, I'm coming to my lemon balm, and now we're gonna do it. Okay, so come onto your backs. So we'll visit all of the activations of foot and simulate some of those actions lying on the ground, so we can check in with the muscles that we're going to ask to bear the load of all of the standing positions. Okay, a few big breath chugs. Check in with your nervous system. I get fired up about Earth Day, almost as fired up as I get about Fire Day. Good, big inhales. You can pause after inhale. Soften the chest, soften the belly. Allow the exhale. So just like anything, we're building skills through practice. So the skill of being like, whew, I'm overextended, let me lay down. And that recognition is a habit pattern in the mind. And then there's big, deep breaths and the connection to your diaphragm and the ability to actually feel a shift happen. That's a skill too, and can be practiced. So instead of every time you get a little worked up being a catastrophe, it's an opportunity to work on your skills. Good. Big inhale, fill and fill some more. Feel fullness and then even a little bit more pressure from fullness. Hold it in. Exhale with a sigh. So the thing about working with these, with the energetic body, which is what we're doing when we're making an effort to calm the system so that we can take really slow, mindful movements. It has a certain feeling, and so you know it through feeling it. And the only way to feel what that shift feels like is to practice the things that maybe you've heard will help. It's a really interesting time because all the things that we're doing have been proven. Science says. So now we have all of the reinforcement behind the action. So you gotta do it. Okay, and then bring your attention in and down with your next breath and fill from low to high. So starting to put in place a particular pattern. And then from putting in place that particular pattern, you can start to feel what areas of the torso aren't moving with breath. Where might there be some stuck energy? And assess as you inhale. And then begin to notice at first the pause or the space between inhale and exhale. And the way you start to feel the shift happen is to smooth out that space from inhale to exhale. Feel passivity in the exhale. So sometimes at first you may have to hold the inhale to be able to let the exhale be passive. But then as you start to come back to yourself and remember your breath, you can take a smooth transition from active to passive. And the exhale can be both passive and complete. And there can be a gentle, effortless, passive pause after exhale. So this is the breath that is the shape of the breath at homeostasis. When there is balance in the system. I find it interesting that for every inhale, we need a little more exhale. And an emphasis on the passive pause to reconcile all that's happening in one breath. So yesterday we went through a ceremonial reenactment of death and rebirth process, and that is inside of every breath. A new opportunity to inhale and be new, and exhale passively, allowing everything that you found to be true, and passively pause to reconcile your experience before being reborn again on the next inhale. On your next exhale, make it complete to bring your attention down to the soles of your feet. On your next inhale, activate through the soles of the feet and let that activation move up the leg to standing leg, standing hip, and then on your exhale, release. Passive pause. Okay, and let this be like a reminder of all the actions that we've taken with such detailed attention to detail until now, and apply that level of attention, a progressive activation, a smooth transition to the edge of effortless effort, and then an exhale that releases, holding no tension from the last repetition before you move into the next repetition. And doing so with that level of curiosity about how you do it. And then in the passive pause, deciding would a resting breath suit, so that in the next repetition, I don't do it the same as I did the last one. If I felt that the last one possibly didn't have the left glute turning on at the same rate as the right glute, or didn't have the front hip bones lifted and I felt a tinge of pain in the low back, or I hyperextended the knee. So if you're doing one of those things that I've sort of been offering up as a possibility, take a resting breath in between repetitions and bring your mind and attention to that particular part of this action and see if you can refine. And this is patient, brave work. It's not glamorous, and sometimes it's lonely. Like, this is just what I'm doing. But it's worth it. Good. Because you'll find the support you need from within. Next time you inhale and activate, hold that effortless effort. And really check in with the rest of the core actions and ground through the palms next to your hips, all four corners extending through the back of the crown. So now you're in mountain pose, but lying flat. So then assess your mountain pose. Good. Pulling the shoulders away from the ears, reaching the arms in two directions, lengthening through the back and the sides of the neck. And now remember your mouth position and your eye containment. So this is bringing yourself to practice. So spending this amount of time may be necessary each time you're coming to your mat to practice one pose, because otherwise you may just be reinforcing old patterns. Okay, and on one of your next inhales, feeling the action come from the front of the hip and not changing any of the spine up the way, float the right heel, and you can ground in through the left heel a little more, feel the activation of the glute in the back. Remember to keep energy running down through the foot. That's what's going to keep the leg on. Good, and so you're like walking side to side. Exhale coming down, inhale coming up the other side. So now we're taking those little baby steps that we take while there's so much support, so that we can sensitively feel what's happening. Because if it's happening here, it's happening every step when you're in standing. Good, so keeping a soft neck and a soft mouth and jaw. And if you can only lift a little bit, keeping the activations in place, then only lift a little bit. And with patient, gentle effort, to really feel that you're able to keep the stabilizations that we've put in place and lift. Feeling the containment at the pelvic floor and the front of the hip bones and the gentle activation of the glutes. All of that in place is your inner support. Good, and if you start to get that going well, exhale, come to your right, and then on an inhale, hinge at the hip and lift your knee right up over your hip, coming into a single leg dead bug here. Good, so you're taking a step up step, and then exhale, take it down and switch sides. Good, so then all the core stabilizations stay in place and you're extending it out long. Good, so now we're starting to feel the amount of activation in the front leg. So imagine when you get up to that one single leg dead bug, that's your front leg in a lunge. So we're working on that hip, knee, ankle alignment. So if you notice that the knee is moving in, where can you activate in the foot more to stabilize in the hip, to get the hip, knee, ankle alignment to sort of be the new groove? Good. Next time you're even on both sides, extend the legs and relax the legs and the feet. Take a little shake with the toes side to side, let everything release. So feel it down into the pelvis, bring your breath down into the pelvis to notice what muscles really had to work to do that and what muscles, feel maybe like they were over-activated, over-efforting. So sense and feel the effects of the practice. And what do you notice? This is where much of the benefit comes, through feeling what happened from the action. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that before we take the next steps? So all of this that we're doing now goes forward with us and forward with us. Okay. On an inhale, activate through both feet. Good, and you can ground the palms or leave the palms up. Grounding the palms helps stabilize the upper back and shoulders. So if you feel like your shoulders are activating a lot when you're doing this, stabilizing them can make that more recognizable. Good, on an inhale, bend the right knee and bring it up to that same position. Good, trying to keep the pelvis balanced side to side and your shin parallel with the ground and your foot flexed. Keeping the left foot really active, bring your right knee out. So we're finding an open hip pose that doesn't shift or change the positioning of the left leg. So feel when you feel that opening across the hip and then take it back. So now we're going from open to closed hip. We're actually staying closed hip, but we're finding that edge. We're going from closed hip to open hip. And when you feel the edge of open hip is when your knee would normally kind of dive in and or the outside of the left leg would give up. And so then that's when you get that sort of positioning where the knee is diving towards midline. So we're training what that opening across the front of the hip feels like without allowing the alignment of the left leg to be compromised. And this is a great ab exercise. I highly recommend it as a way of grooving in the core containments and the stability that you'll need to be able to begin to really work your standing poses.
It feels like danger to me in the body.
Danger, so
yeah,
go less
yeah.
And really ground to the outside edge of your left foot. So this is what got to stabilize that whole outer left side. So when you're in standing doing this, you'll really stay grounded to the outside edge of the foot.
That's helpful because I noticed that my back was wanting to arch.
Yeah, so there's kind of a lifting that happens. You're like, so that is this whole side of the body being like, I got you, girl. Yeah, so you've got to just say, oh, thank you for doing that my entire life. But maybe this way would start to work the muscles that would do this in a way that wasn't a strain, that actually felt like more stability. Okay, come back to the center, take the leg down, shake the leg side to side, feel the difference side to side, feel the work that has to happen to stabilize in the hip. And then when we take it up to the next levels, we'll be feeling the stability that comes from the foot and the ground also. So it won't be quite, I mean, this is floating in space with it, so it won't be quite that hard to stabilize it in standing. But this really helps you feel what the action is like to have to work on the opposite leg to keep the hip from dumping. We'll call it a dump. Okay, other side. Inhale, activate. And then bring the left knee up. Good, so there's a lot of help in this process from the right glute, from the standing leg. Okay, and then give it a go. Find that edge where further would lift you up and see if you can find gentle support from the upper body by grounding the palms, lengthening them in two directions, a little more out. Good, because that will turn on the lats to actually add more stabilization too. Good, and then, so really you all are doing well, it looks good. Really bringing the whole leg in together, so noticing when the knee wants to come in first. Okay, and when it feels like you've moved past your capacity, you can stop, or 2 or 3 more. So thinking about if you're wanting to understand a standing pose, experiencing what it's like on the ground is really helpful because there's less nervous system load. So you can feel when your body's like, oh boy. But when you're standing, there's just like oh, we got this. We're doing it. The whole class is doing it. I'm doing it. Good. Extend the leg long, shake the toes side to side. Okay, I'm clearing out, we'll take an infant roll, lower body infant roll on both sides. So feeling all of these activations we put in place inside your infant roll and get the release of the outer hip as you cross it over and really stretch out the fingertips to feel a nice release of this side body that we really worked. Okay, so over and back, both sides, and we'll end up on your bellies. Okay, remembering the tops of the feet and the activation through the tops of the feet on the next inhale. Align your legs in the back. Feel the heels come towards center and the ankle flatten towards the floor, and the glutes come on an inhale, and on an exhale that relaxes. So we've been working towards this. We're on our way with a steady, gentle effort. And that's the same thing you're looking for as far as the activation of the glutes to get this hugging action around the sacrum. So what happens when one glute is, firing faster, or one glute isn't firing, there's a subtle pulling on the sacrum. And over time, that gets destabilized, and it has consequences all up the spine, as you might imagine. Okay, next time you inhale and flatten through the feet, maintain that. Good, soften where you need to in the upper body, in the mid-back. Good, and then we'll take the right foot up and back. So now we're doing like we're walking, like we did it upright. So your top of your foot stays pointed towards the wall. Inhale, lift, it comes from the glute. Exhale, lower, and then switch sides. So now we're taking a focus on the glute action in the gait. Can you guys kind of feel how this would, you could work your way up and you'd be in standing. So now we're feeling the back activation. Notice what happens in the shoulders and the neck. You can have the palms gently grounded down to help stabilize that as you're kind of redirecting the effort down low. Good. And next time you lower and are even on both sides, relax both heels out to the side, shake the heels side to side and release. You can kind of wiggle the pelvis so that no tension from the last action goes into the next action. Okay, then bend the right foot so the sole of the foot is pointing towards the ceiling, and there's a 90-degree bend at the knee. Good. Ground through the left foot to stabilize and turn on both glutes, and then lift the sole of the foot back an inch or two and then lower. Good. And so trying to feel that your shin is perpendicular with the ground, that it's like you're pressing the sole of your foot up into the ceiling, and both glutes being on maintains the stability in the low back and makes it so that the mid back doesn't start to do the tasks of the bum. Anybody feeling that? Mm-hmm. Okay. We're waking up some glutes. I can't wait to see what happens. Okay, extend the leg long, shake the pelvis side to side, release between rounds. Good, and then switch sides. Good, so this is where you would feel if some internal rotation wants to happen at the foot. So finding the position where there's kind of weight down the center of your thigh bone, your foot is active as if the floor is underneath it, and then you may need a little bit of external rotation at the hip like that. Can you feel that? Mm-hmm. And then press up through my hand. Good, okay. That's where it is. All right, and then starting to lift on an inhale and lower, stabilizing through the opposite side. I'm gonna adjust your foot. Mm-hmm. There. Okay. Can I give you an adjustment? Yeah. Okay, so really feeling this inner edge push, like you're pushing my hand. That's where you'll be able to find it. So press up. Good. And then release, control down. Good. So that's the range of motion that you're trying to maintain and train. Good. So all the things we've felt before now, as far as the habits of your feet, will apply now that you really need to push through the ball of your foot and press my foot up like that. Good. And then lower. Good. So feel all that? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And then come down, extend the leg long, relax the hips. All right. We're going to bring both arms up overhead. And on an inhale, reach in both directions. Good. And on exhales, relax. So really trying to release any held tension before we move into another foundation. And sort of set those activations into your body mind. Okay, slide your hands back underneath your shoulders. Your elbows will come to point towards the ceiling. Good, and really ground through the palms and ground through the tops of the feet. Contain the core actions. So keeping a lift at the torso and the glutes are on to hold their own and support the pelvis. Contain at the core and press up, grounding through the tops of the feet to all fours. Good. So a really big core containment on your way up. So that's the place where you can start to train that. So, no matter if there's an Instagram push-up challenge, you just modify and do this one. You can still get lots of good work, and this would prepare the body for something like a push-up so that every time you're doing a push-up, it's not causing shearing at the sacrum. Okay, now try to come forward and down. So shifting the weight over the wrists, elbows bend back, core containment's in place, and you're lowering down. Also a really good place to train your Chaturanga. If that's something you're into, you'll know it. If you don't know the word, you're fine. Bring the hands a little forward, contain at the little ribs, press up and back again. So a lot of the support for this comes from the tops of the feet and the glutes holding their own. Good. Okay, square up into all fours. And the tops of the feet stay as much grounded as they were when you were using them to press up and back. And then the hands have a gentle external rotation in both directions, gentle bend in the knee. So this action at the hand is important when you're taking yourself forward and down, because that's going to turn on all the support of the shoulder girdle. This isn't even our main lesson for the day, but okay, do one more, try it. So those shoulders holding their own is important too. One more, press up. So when you're doing a peel up, that ain't it. When it's the chest lifting first and then the belly, that you're not holding the core containments. So you could even just lift to the point where you can hold your core containments and go back down. That would be a really safe area to work in. Okay, come to all fours. Now we'll take the lunge position that we're moving towards, but really feeling, I'm coming. That as you lift your foot up and back, right, we visited this pose on the ground, that you don't let the low belly drop out, and that the low back is starting to take all the strain for the low belly, and then the glute isn't actually doing the job that we're talking about, okay? So we'll just be sort of switching side to side with as little shifting in the pelvis this way as possible. So if I came around and showed you that foot activation feeling, it's that. So the sole of the foot will end up pointing towards the ceiling, and you're really working that range of motion. If when you lift up to the thigh being parallel with the ground, you can't help but let the pelvis go, only go as high as you can go without releasing the pelvis. And little by little, that range of motion will develop. And also, the front of the hips are probably tight.
So okay, just to stay in tabletop?
Is it? So does it feel like if you're lifting, there'll be a shift? Good. So any amount that you can lift, and working your crawling foundation, which you already know will be really good work. Good. Okay. So then, next time you're even on both sides, come down and ground through the top of the left foot and the right foot and lift the front hip bones and start to walk your hands back and then lift from the core to the hips being an extension to a kneeling foundation. So the tops of the foot are the support here. And as we move into a half kneeling, having the support of this lower leg, the glute, and all of this hip activation that we've been working on is what's going to prevent a dipping out to the side. So we're making an effort to ground through the opposite foot that we're taking forward, hold all the core containments in place. Glutes are really important to lift and set your foot down. And come back. Okay, so give that a couple of goes. Good. If you need some additional support under your knees, you can add a blanket under your knees. Good. So this is a really good, really safe place to train these low belly activations and all the stabilizations that you'll need for standing poses.
I know that's not how you're supposed to do it.
I know, you're doing it. And if you want to do what you're going to do, you got to do it. So just keep doing this and it'll get easier and easier. I know it's hard. Good. Okay. Coming back down into child's pose. And if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all in there, just breathe. Think of the positive inhale coming in and nourishing your whole system with vital energy. And on the exhale, release any expectation. On an inhale, coming up to all fours and taking some intuitive movements to move the pelvis and the hips so your hips can come out to the side. We've visited this before. It's called Ganesh Mudra, and it's the remover of obstacles. So you're feeling down into your pelvis and into your hips. So adding the focus there and movement side to side. Legs can be wide or narrow. So if you're paying attention, you can feel into the areas that are stuck and tight and start to release them. And this is a really safe position to do so. As we start to get into hip openers that are mostly done in seated poses with the weight of the body on you, there's lots of risk, I guess we could put it. There's lots of risk for putting too much pressure on the knee, too much pressure on the hip in a way that isn't actually building towards also having a stable hip. But as you can feel here, you're mobilizing the parts that you want to be mobile, and then you're able to stabilize the parts that you want to be stable by continuing to ground through the tops of the feet. You can release some of that tension all around the sacrum and the low back. Okay, coming to the core containments on all fours, and then lifting up by walking the hands back so tops of the feet are grounded. Walking the hands back and then lifting from a hip hinge. Yep, that was really good. Lifting from a hip hinge into kneeling. And then you can have your hands on your low belly and on your chest if you want. This brings a lot more awareness to if you're letting the front of the pelvis drop out. So this is a feedback system. And then on an inhale, bring your right foot forward. So you're really grounding through the left. Once you get it there, we're going to leave it there. Whew. Okay, so the positioning for your lunge, oftentimes we'll kind of jump right into a hip stretching lunge, but we're looking for a hip stabilizing lunge. So the hip being right over the knee, exactly 90 with the legs is what we're after, okay? And then really grounding through the top foot by broadening to the outside edge of the foot and putting your foot bandha in place that I've been on you about. Okay, and then a gentle internal rotation at the foot and feel what that feels like in the hip. And then ground to the outside edge of the foot so that the knee, hip, and ankle are in alignment. Good, and feel all that stabilization that you get from the activation at the foot. Good, and then ground to the outside edge of the back foot. And then see if you can have all the core actions in place up the way and keep stabilizing there. So you may feel some strange behaviors arise, or maybe you've got it at this position. To take it the next step forward, you can heel toe your foot in an inch or so and see how it goes there. Internally rotating gently at the foot and grounding to the outside edge and finding your edge in this way. So if you feel good at that position and you're getting lots of good work and you're able to stabilize and it doesn't feel too scary, then stay there until you're like, maybe I could. And take it in this gentle progression. In this way, you'll never overextend yourself. So glutes on in the back. So I haven't named them, but notice what they did. Good, so those guys are big stabilizers for this big oppositional hip action. Good, and if it feels okay there, you could bring arms up overhead and maintain your low rib action. Good, so this is all really straight, and your palms are broad and reaching up. Good, you're there. Okay, so these are the same actions and feelings that we're looking for when we move this shape into standing. But now we're not so far from the ground. Okay, on an exhale, bring your hands back to your chest, and as smoothly as you can, step that foot back and then lower down into child's pose. And rest. So feel the effects of the practice, feel what it's like in the pelvis, feel what it's like in the low belly. Breathe down into those spaces that you've asked to work really hard. And release the low back and let it drain down the legs and into the earth. Okay, and as you're ready, making your way up in a wise way with your core actions in mind, back to tall kneeling. Good, and then bring the opposite hand to your belly and one to your chest, and then holding all the support in the low body from the grounding down of the tops of the feet first. Then bring the opposite leg up and forward. Good. Okay, and then gently internally rotate the foot and ground to the outside edge. Good, and remember your foot bandha. So if you're looking down at your foot and you see the ankle is inside of the foot, really working on that arch by paying lots of attention to the foot bandha and the grounding to the outside edge. Good, and shift your weight back just slightly. Good, there. So there's just lots of containment in the front. And the front hip bone lift is present here to balance the pelvis. Because if the low back is tight or the mid back is tight, it will want to pull the pelvis from the back and release forward. Good, and if it feels like you're feeling risky, take a heel toe of the foot in and balance. Remembering the action at the foot and the back glute.
I'm on day 2 of my cycle and my pelvis really didn't want to be contained.
Oh. It will actually support the downward movement. So all of this is with the action of the feet, supporting what's called apana, which is the downward flow of energy. So we're going with the flow still, even if it's agitating in a way. Okay, really good. So arms up, if that feels comfortable. Good. Lots of outside edge, remembering that outside edge. Okay, I'm going to sneak this one up on you. Tuck your toes back behind you and press up. Good, and bring your positioning to more of a pyramid. So straighten through the front knee and bring your back foot, rather than sort of more of a traditional warrior position, close the toes and close the hips. And gauge where your foot is by where you can keep your heel down in the back. So the tendency will maybe be to rotate here, try to rotate the heel back. So we're trying to get a pretty specific calf stretch. So rotate your heel out, Mary, in the back.
It felt that.
Yep, same thing. Either bring your toes in or rotate your heel out. Good. Maybe even a little more. Good. So if you need to close up a little more, there. Okay, so it could be considered a wrong warrior. It's just a different thing that we're doing to really emphasize a stretch in the calf in a certain place. Is everyone feeling that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm feeling more like I'm doing the drunken sailor.
Okay, so to stabilize your drunken sailor, you can take the foot out wider in the back, okay? Just give your sailor a little more space. That's all you gotta do. Okay, and then everything that we just worked on with the lunge is in place in the upper body. And the leg is slightly bent in the front. And now we'll work the range of motion that's possible, maintaining this and bending the knee. And internally rotating at the foot and grounding to the outside edge. Okay, keep all that activation at the foot and the stabilization in the hip, and then straighten and bend. So this activation at the foot and the knee, and really learning this, was the first time I didn't hear my basketball knees talking to me. So this is how you're going to create the space at the knee. Okay, and come into the lunge. Good, keep the core actions in place and inhale the arms up overhead. And ground to the outside edge of both feet. These are stable warriors. Okay, bring the hands down to your hips. We'll be working on moving or feeling what it's like to move, say, from a warrior 1 to a warrior 2 where the hip is open, but we're going to be exploring it like we did on the ground. So your knee is your guide. Grounding to the outside edge of the foot. You're opening, you're opening, you're opening. If you open further, it's going to have a pull on the inner thigh, which is going to pull the knee out of alignment. So holding the knee in alignment and letting that be what helps you choose what's an open hip. Good. Good, maybe step that back foot a little even forward more. Good. So that you can really keep your front hip bones lifted because it's a tight mid-back. Yeah. So finding the place where that's not strained too much so that it doesn't pull here because it gets tight and it's pulling this up and then letting that go. So we're trying to bring this back foot in so there's less of a strain of oppositions so you can maintain this first. And then working, just holding in that pose and slowly working it back will help with releasing that. Okay. So how did that go? Do we find the difference between open hip and closed hip? And what the guide for choosing is. So Mel, come back a little bit. Look down at your knee the whole time and just move your hip. And only go as far with the hip as you can. Keep this action in the knee. Okay, so then you guys feel the gentle pull across the front of the hips when you're in open hips still, but without sacrificing the knee. That's what we're after. Watch for that tendency in the back leg. Okay, step forward, ground through the outside edge of the feet, and take all your core actions, stand in mountain pose, and breathe in and down. Feel your feet. So we're resting here in standing, active rest. Possibly we've been sort of without, I set the rhythm and pattern in place of breath at the beginning of class. Check in with it now. Breath down low to feel the effects of the practice in the pelvis and feel it move up the back body. Okay, step the opposite foot back. So remember, we're keeping the toes pointing forward and just stepping the back foot far back as you can that it doesn't cause a release in the pelvis. So that's how we're gauging where our deep is, right? So that place where I can honor my core actions and really feel the actions required for the pose without moving into compensation. Okay, everyone looks good there. And then you can bring a hand to your low belly, a hand to your chest, and then take the action at the foot to gently internally rotate and ground to the outside edge. And then feel the stabilization from both glutes and start to bend the knee and straighten. So remembering that the compensation will happen at the very beginning. So keeping your awareness at your foot and the stabilization in the hip that creates so that we can maintain space at the knee. And the more we train this slowly, patiently, and consistently, the more often it will happen that unconsciously the foot and the hip are supporting the knee. But not until we do all this conscious work will we have even access to the muscles that will do that. So this is good work. Good, remembering your foot activations. Good, slide your heel out till you feel my foot. Nope. So you're just bringing your foot to the edge of my foot. Yeah. And then you could take it in further, but don't let your heel slide in, and keep your heel grounded. Back glute. Yeah. Okay, and then stay down in your lunge and maintain your core actions, or stay here and you can bring the arms up. So now, once we have the stable foundation, we can sensitively feel if we're overextending at the rib cage, and find the place where you can be at the edge of shoulders at the edge of their mobility, but not compensating and moving into just a shifting of the rib cage. Very good. And then hands back down to the chest and the belly, to the hips. And then now we're exploring open hip, closed hip. So both hip bones point forward, the action happening at the knee, and the gaze towards the knee is what is deciding how far you can turn the hips to open. Good, so that whole standing leg, the one that's at the front of the lunge, doesn't hardly move at all. If there's movement at the hip or at the knee, that's exposing a compensation that's happening in the pelvis. Okay, and come to an open hip, or where you're feeling the gentle stretch across the front of the pelvis and the knee is staying in alignment. So check in with that. And it brings a bit more of a stretch to the front here than if you were to release that and let that go. And then all of that work that should be happening here is going to the inner knee, which can't do it. The MCL pays for it. And the actions come from the foot and the knee. The foot and the hip. So your knee can be stable. Good, so twisting the other way, Beth. You're opening across this way. Okay, and close the hip. And step the back foot forward. Come into mountain pose. All right, and remembering what we did earlier in class, where we were lying on the back and in mountain pose, and the activations of the back hip. Often what I'm seeing in gates is that we're dumping here, hanging out in the hips so that we can take the step, and then dumping here. So instead of every step we're taking stabilizing this container, it's destabilizing this container and causing lots of strain in the hips and the low back. So holding all this in place, you can even keep your hands on your pelvis to feel. We'll just stay, you have to have all the actions in standing leg so that that hip doesn't get lost. Yeah, back it up. Give room to work. Let's do this. Okay, both glutes are on, hips are stabilized in the front, heel comes to opposite toe. Your foot bandha is in place so that when you're coming down, the arch is on, so that now you can get the stabilization from the foot to support the knee. Good, and front hip bones stay lifted. Notice if under your hands that are letting go, that's where your work is, softening the mid upper back. Good, and turn around and go back. So walk slow and your compensation will be revealed. You'll feel where you're letting go. And so this is a great thing to do for grounding and stabilizing, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe in the dew of the grass. Okay, Come to standing at the back of your mat. Bring your hands to your heart in some way. Take all your core actions. Fill, inhale. And so you were filling with gratitude for your amazing body and how it supported you. And on the exhale, soften into your stacked bones. Find as much ease in posture as you can. So effortless effort. Thank you all for practicing and taking care. I see you.